A lot of people in my comments asked for a breakdown video of my Great Tusk Mill deck that I'm currently 7-0 in tournaments on. Let's go through how to play and what to look for in your matchups. The first thing to note is this deck does not take prize cards, but instead we're relying on Great Tusk's ability Land Collapse. So this is my ideal board state when I'm playing this deck. This allows us to always get the maximum value off of Professor Sada's Vitality by having 2 targets for the ancient Pokemon. We're able to cycle energies into play, and when this Great Tusk gets knocked out, we're able to immediately pump up the next one to the active spot and then replace it to continually cycling our Great Tusk through the line. Pairing these on the bench, they're usually not the main target for your opponent, so they're going to stay on the bench for the most part. The big thing to remember is not to over bench yourself with other useless cards in this scenario, because we are kind of limited on bench space. So realistically, these should be the only cards on your bench, and you're just constantly cycling more Great Tusks back down. The only time you'll ever play anything really different is when you're cycling in an Abra to make sure you don't deck yourself out, or if you're going to have to rely on Ethan Sudowoodo in order to retreat lock your opponent. So you're repeating this process, cycling through the Great Tusk, land collapsing your opponent out of resources and milling their deck down. When your opponent gets down to the last few prizes, or you think they're out of enough resources, this is where you're going to try and set up your checkmate format. You're going to play down your neutralization zone to block any damage to your Great Tusk. You can use a counter culture to ensure that something that can attack you will be stuck in the active spot. And if you need to, instead of being able to mill them out, you can simply retreat lock them out until they draw the rest of their deck. With this setup, with either Ethan Sudowoodo or the Great Tusk continually milling off the rest of the deck, in theory, if the opponent has no stadiums to bump neutralization out of the way, most decks won't be able to actually tolerate this, and it'll pretty much be game on board. This deck is super strong, but the biggest problem is going to be your resource management. It's really important to make sure you're capitalizing on your uses of your super rods, your night stretchers, and your pal pads. I almost always will be pal padding back to Sada's Vitality the second they're both in my discard. That way I have the best chance of drawing back into it on my next turn. Night stretchers are really important to be able to cycle energies in late game. I try not to use these in the early game because I have so many super rods that are easy to find, and I have a lot of other cards that can dig out both Pokemon and energy from my deck, so I'd rather not use these until absolutely necessary. For most of the game, when I'm using a super rod, my preferred super rod is when I have 2 Great Tusk in the discard plus an energy. That way I'm always putting that back in. Minimally, you want to guarantee that you have 2 fighting energies in your discard at all times. That way your Professor Sada's Vitality is getting maximum value. And if you really get down to it to where you're pretty thin on cards, but you just have a few more turns to win the game, an Abra plus a Jet Energy is a great way to make sure you always have just enough cards to never deck yourself out. All in all, I haven't seen a ton of bad matchups for this deck, and it's really just about knowing when to put down your checkmate format with the Great Tusk and the neutralization zone versus needing to capitalize with your Ethan Sudowoodo. So give this a try. Let me know if this video is a help, and if you liked it, be sure to drop a follow.